All right, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Market Pulse this Wednesday here on Hot 96. Now, a lot has been happening, particularly with the ride-hailing applications. We have had driver strike. We've had a lot of conversations around that particular space. And this morning, I'm here with Linda Ndungu, who's the country manager for Bolt. Linda, how are you holding up?
I'm doing well.
So there's been a lot of noise in your industry, and I just want to understand, where's all this noise coming from? We've heard from the driver's side, and we want to understand from the management side what is going on.
Right, and that's a good question. It's a question that needs unpacking, I would say, because if you look at it strictly from the driver perspective, there's several issues that have been raised. There's been issues around perhaps a price structure. There's been issues around how we relate in terms of the app companies and the drivers. And the bane of it, I would say, is really around the pricing structure. And I'm sure you've heard from different corners there has been a bit of a push towards adjusting prices, which actually we did, because we recognize the cost of living is high. It's hard for everybody. And so one of the places of convergence that we found is an adjustment upwards in pricing. But the thing is, it's a bit of a difficult question to tackle because cost of living is high everywhere. It's high for the drivers, it's high for the consumers of the service, right? The people who take the taxi. And so when we're making all these considerations, we have to think through, if we are just pricing, for example, is it still going to remain an affordable option? Or are people going to stop taking taxis, which then is not beneficial for drivers, it's not beneficial for the app companies. And so these are the things that we have to balance to find a middle ground. And that's why there's a lot of noise. It's not a straight, okay, we do this and then it's fixed.
So one of the things that the drivers have been pushing for, particularly here in Kenya, is the fact that they want a minimum base fare of about 300 shillings. And I just want to know, from a business standpoint, how difficult would that be to implement?
It would be, there's two pieces to it. Technically, it's not difficult to implement, right? You could change it. But the reality is, again, it comes back to the, two-sided marketplace. So if you raise a minimum fare, then what does that mean in practice? And that, maybe to break it down a bit further, when we look at fare and we look at the components of the fare of each trip, minimum fare is just one piece, right? So you have minimum fare is that fare that is there, present, regardless. If I move from here where I am to where you are in a car, 300 shillings. Then we add other aspects. We look at how many kilometers go on that trip. How long was that trip? So there are three pieces to the fare. So you could start with 300 shillings, yes, but then if it's a 10-kilometer trip, then it goes up. If you're in traffic for 2 hours, the price goes up. So in reality, if we're starting with 300 shillings, you could end up with a fare of 1,000, 2,000, depending. And that's when the economics on both sides kick in, because is the passenger going to afford it in the end? So while, yes, it could be click of a button, change to 300 minimum fare, is it actually going to yield the result that we want collectively? And ultimately, my view is that what driver partners want, similar to what app companies want, is more money in their pockets. So it's not so much the fare, it's how much am I left with at the end of the day. And so for us as app companies, that's what we're looking at. How can we make sure that what you're left with at the end of the day is sustainable and it actually helps your life, as opposed to raising the fare, losing demand, we all go home because we're not making enough.
All right. Now, the argument from drivers, at least from some of those that I have engaged with, is the fact that they're saying whenever there's rain or the demand is high and the fare prices increase, customers are still willing to pay. But the argument is, how is it that when it's during a normal day, normal operations, the fares are so low, they're basically making anything out of it?
So it's a game of numbers, because remember, one, it's ride-hailing is for the masses, if I can put it that way. And so there is a scenario where if I'm a driver, I can do one trip for 5,000 shillings and I've made the money that I wanted and I'm off for the day. But in reality, that won't happen. Those trips are few and far in between. Maybe if you get a tourist from JKA and they want to go all the way to Masai Mara, that's great. But for it to be a viable, sustainable business, then what we need is many people taking trips over an extended period of time. And that's why, to your question, when there's high demand, the price goes up because there's a lot of people who are actually looking to take the service, which then means everyone that's on the platform, because remember, also drivers are many, they're in the tens of thousands. So then everybody gets a trip, everybody gets multiple trips, and everybody makes money. The converse is true. When there's not so many people who want to take trips, who want to take a taxi, and there's very many drivers on the platform, then it doesn't quite work the same. So when there's high demand, there are people who are willing to take the trip at whatever price that it is. But when there's low demand, not so much. So we have to also try and attract people. So that's why it's a two-sided marketplace. That's why the fares have to vary depending on how many drivers are on the platform, how many riders are on the platform.
All right, you control a sizable share of this market. And I just want to know some of the recent strikes that we have seen and seeing drivers decide that we're going to park our cars for the day. What has been the cost of that to the business?
Well, I mean, that's a controversial question. I cannot give you a number, as you know, but we do see the effect of it, because then we see that the demand, the passengers that want to ride don't necessarily get the rides as quick as they would want to get them, which then at the end of the day leads to lower profitability for the business. So it's not great. We all lose when drivers are unhappy.
Yeah, and also just looking at the other argument that we're getting from a lot of your drivers, they're saying that the apps particularly are not factoring in the cost of inflation, the rising cost of fuel, and basically the day-to-day running of this business. And I want to know, as an organization, apart from just increasing the prices, which I believe was about 10%, what else are you doing to make sure that you address some of these challenges?
Okay, so I would want to take us back to last year, just to address that, because last year we did raise prices before this price increase, specifically because cost of fuel went up. And I'd also like to point out that actually fuel prices have been declining, right? And it's not that we've taken the price down, because fuel prices went down. So we are cognizant of this and the costs of living and the maintenance cost of the vehicles. And that's why you find on the app, there's different categories of vehicles that you can take that are priced differently. Because it comes back to, at the end of the day, how much is this driver taking home? And so, for example, a two-wheeler, a border driver probably can, afford, or they can give a trip that's at a lower price and still take home something sizable compared to a 7-seater vehicle. That one would need to be priced higher. And that's why you see on the app, there's all these different categories with these different price points, because it actually considers how much does it take to run that vehicle, and will anything be left over for the driver after all those, maintenance and service costs.
Yeah. All right. So the other campaign that, again, and I think a lot of our conversation today is likely to focus on the drivers because of all the issues that have been coming up. We've seen a lot of them sort of harass their colleagues. Yes. And this is particularly to do with issues of stickers, trying to make sure that they demarket the app. And I want to know, are these concerns that you are appraised on, and what are you doing to safeguard those drivers who would still want to promote Bolt and other ride-hailing apps?
Yes, and that's a very good question. And the reality is those are criminal acts, and we just do not condone criminal acts. And so what we've done, and we're doing this and with consultation from NTSA, anyone found engaging in this type of criminal behavior will be subject to a criminal process. And so they will be subject to arrests, they will be subject to facing the law, because that's vandalism. There is no driver that has any business harassing another driver because they want to pursue a cause. You can use your influence to have others join your cause, but it's not acceptable to use brute force to, deny another driver a livelihood. And it's also a bit unfair to these drivers who are branded, because they are branded because they believe in the work that they're doing. And also, the kind of work that drivers on our platforms do is free and it's voluntary. So anybody can join or not join. And so it's rather unfair that the faction of drivers that have particular things that they would want us to discuss are taking it out on the others. It's not right in our view. And when it crosses the line and becomes criminal behavior, then we take action against those, and we protect the ones that, have our branding and are our ambassadors.
All right, because again, Linda, just on that same breath of taking action, I just want to know, over the last couple of months, what has Bolt been able to do?
Right. So a couple of things. We have informed the police. We're working very closely with them because now we've seen over, the different series of protests that have happened. It started well. Peaceful demonstrations we have no issue with, and we respect everyone's right to share their views and come to the table and have a discussion. But when it comes to damaging property, when it comes to harassing drivers, then now we have to involve the police. So anytime we know interactions of this nature might come up, the police is involved. They are aware. We also inform our drivers who have our branding on that, things could arise, and we, tell them to stick to safer areas where there's, ideally police presence, because that's how we can protect them. And thirdly, when we do get those reports, because we also encourage them to report, if anyone has vandalized your car, if anyone has done something to you on a personal level, let us know. Then now we use this, and they share the evidence as well. And we forward this to the police, and then the requisite action is taken.
All right, let's talk about the question of incentives. There's the argument that a lot of customers are getting incentives. They're sort of getting their prices reduced, but the drivers are not getting any incentive. So how do we balance the incentive for the customer and the incentive for the drivers?
Okay, and again, question I'd like to unpack. Every discount that is given to riders is paid by Bolt. We take that cost. So at the end of the day, the drivers get that money. So if a trip was 200 shillings and there was a discount of 50 shillings, the driver is going to get that 50 shillings reimbursed to them. And they can take it out for free once a week. They can take it out every day if they want. So that, I think, needs to be made clear. All the discounts are borne by the company. And so the fare that is there, the driver gets that. Secondly, we do have incentives for drivers, other incentives. For example, if I go back to branding, all our drivers who are branded, if they hit a certain number of rides, they earn extra money. So that's an incentive, right? So not only are you being a good brand ambassador, as you have chosen to, you get something on top. And we run various other campaigns. For example, if you finish X number of rides, you get a cashback. There's different things we do for drivers. And we have bigger programs even. We just concluded one that we're calling Drive for a Prize, where we awarded a section of drivers, and they got a wide variety of gifts for riding with us. We also have, as we were talking a little bit earlier, an entrepreneurship program where, should you want to expand your business, because drivers are entrepreneurs, right? Yeah. So we support drivers in various ways, in addition to providing the ride-hailing platform.
All right, let's talk about commission. Again, this is right at the center of this argument and all these frustrations that we're getting from drivers. And are we likely to see a scenario where Bolt then says we're going to take a cut in terms of the commission that we are getting?
Okay, good question. Now, when a trip happens, the driver takes 82% of that fare. Bolt takes 18%. Why? This is what is stipulated by law. And so we stick to the law, we stick to the regulations. 18% for the app company, 82% for the driver. And because this has been made very clear, this is where we're sticking to. There's not going to be a scenario where we're going to take more than 18% because we work within the confines of the law. The only thing which I think is maybe a valid point to touch on is there has been a contentious issue about VAT, value-added tax. In value-added tax, any tax person will tell you that value-added tax is borne by the final consumer. If I go and buy a dress, there's going to be VAT on it, and I will pay that VAT. If a driver goes and buys tires, there's VAT on those tires. He's going to pay VAT. In the same way, when the driver comes on the platform, they are purchasing a service from the app company. This service is lead generation, because they'll come on that platform and they'll find Linda who wants to take a trip. So for that service, that's what we take 18%, and then they take the difference. And now for that particular service, then there's a VAT that is levied. And KRA recently clarified that because the driver is a consumer of that service, then the VAT should be borne by them. And that's why you see that some app companies have, our 18% commission, which is the fee for the service. And then there's a tax that should be borne by the driver, who is the end consumer.
All right, let's talk about policy and just the role of the regulators, the likes of NTSA, and what more can they do? What more can the government do to make sure that they streamline the sector?
A lot. To be fair and to be honest, this is what we've been lobbying for collectively, by the way, driver partners, driver groups, as well as us as app companies. There's so much more that can be done. For example, when we came up with these regulations, the regulations are good in and of themselves, but they have some contentious clauses that have led to these issues. One of the things the government had pledged to do that we're still pushing that they do is an economic study. Why an economic study? This study is objective, it's unbiased, it looks at the driver holistically, it looks at the app company holistically. What are the economic dynamics that we need to consider when thinking about regulating pricing, regulating the sector, because this would help everyone, all of us, the government, driver partners, and app companies, to collectively define what good pricing looks like in our market. Because remember, ride-hailing is not an essential service, but we want it to be a thriving ecosystem where drivers are happy, where app companies are happy, where even more players can come in so that it can grow because it's good for the economy, it will create more jobs. But we cannot do that until we address this very sticky issue on pricing. And it's very difficult to do so if we don't have a clear and biased view of actually this is how the economics of this sector works. So if the government would, take the lead, do this economic study, they commission it and they get it done, that would be very good, because then it would help us to answer those questions. Should we have a commission cap? Should we not? Should we have a minimum fare? Should we not? Should we do anything else that is good practice that helps both parties? That's the one thing. The second thing that is often a pain point for us app companies, we really want to engage drivers. But like I mentioned, drivers are in the tens of the thousands. And it's very difficult to have one-on-one conversations when there's thousands and thousands in the marketplace. So what would be an easier thing to do is if we had a collective way to organize drivers. For example, the way matatus have circles. Then you can have dialogue that is beneficial both ways. You can hear all the viewpoints, not maybe just one or two, and then we can find consensus that works for everyone. So those are the two big things that I think that the government and the regulations and policy can help us to move forward.
All right, so let's talk about driver retention. And I just want to know, over the course of this noise, have you lost some drivers? And maybe if you could give us figures on that.
Jimmy, you ask hard questions. So if, I'm trying to see how to best answer this question, I would say that in the normal course of business, because again, it's voluntary. You work if you want, when you want. So you will always have drivers coming in, drivers leaving. And the trend has been the same, truly. Some drivers come in, some drivers leave. Those who still see the value of engaging with us as an app company are still with us. And those who perhaps are, have found other things, other ways to be entrepreneurs, then they have left us.
All right, do we have a number on that?
We do, but I'm not going to share it.
I had to try. So let's talk about the question around safety. Again, particularly as far as ride-hailing apps and the platforms that the kind that you are running, one of the concerns that we have seen over time is the question of customer safety. And particularly when we talk about our sisters and ladies who use these different applications. And this is a concern that hasn't gone away. And I want to know, what are the other safety measures that you're currently working on to ensure the safety of all your passengers?
Yes, safety is a big topic, and it has been a big topic for a long time. I will say, though, that at least, from our side of things, it's become better over time. We're not perfect because even one is reason to do something. But if we look at the statistics, if we look at the incidences, if we look at the type of incidences that are happening, definitely it's getting better over time. And some of the things that we've done, we keep highlighting over and over again how to make sure you're safe when you're taking a cab, any cab. Make sure it's the right one. Make sure it's, if it's Aspatio, make sure it's Aspatio. If it's Gray, make sure it's Gray. If it's Kamau, who's the driver, make sure it's Kamau, that's the driver, and not, the other person. And there's several other things that we have on there. When you're on the trip, you know, there's a button that you can press should you be in a safety situation. You can now share a trip with a friend. You can literally share your trip details with someone and they can follow the trip and see how it's going. We also have other features that we've launched, such as trip anomaly, which basically means that if the vehicle is moving in the opposite direction, say I was going to town and town is north and the vehicle is moving south, that triggers something in our system. If the vehicle is still for too long, that triggers something in our system. We also, for drivers as well, because it's both ways, we also have a feature where you can actually see as a driver if you're going into an area where historically we know maybe at night things happen. So we have those kind of flags. And we keep building all these different tools and measures to ensure that both the driver and the passengers are safe across before, during, and after.
All right, so let's talk about the average, excuse me, let's talk about the average trips that a driver makes in a day and compare that to the average earnings that they make in a day. And I just want you to take us through what you've seen in your systems and what more can be done to make sure that we increase the earnings of the driver, because at the end of the day, they're all trying to make a living.
100%. Now, several things. Again, because this is voluntary, you work when you want. So there's different categories of drivers. There's those that we call part-time. For example, I offer the service when I'm going to work and when I'm going home. So that's that. The number of rides that I'll do is just that. And probably my earnings will not necessarily increase so much. Then there's the ones that we call primary drivers. And this probably is a group that we would be, you know, most keen to see how we can help them earn more, because this is where they come and they offer their services all day, every day. And so assuming that a driver is with us and they're not multi-upping, for example, and which then means, you know, they're giving their 8 hours to Bolt, then we would look at other things to define their earnings. Because now if we split those primary drivers, there's those with vehicles, there's those without vehicles. Now, if I look at the ones with vehicles from our data, these guys are doing well. I can tell you stories of people who came in, you know, they tell us in these different forums that we have. So I came in, I have my little car, I'm paying off a loan on this car, I'm doing this thing full time. In 2 years, I'm buying another car. And in 3 years, I've bought 2 cars, I've become a fleet owner. So we have those stories. But the reason I segmented is because I want to show there's a wide difference between all, you know, the different categories of drivers. So these ones with their own cars, they do well. They make sufficient money to even like buy other vehicles over time. This one's renting. So Jimmy is renting a car from Linda. Linda says to Jimmy, every day you must give me 1,000 bob. I do not care. Go do your thing. Now, that class of driver might struggle because there's a big extra cost that is being taken away from their earnings. And for us, these are kind of the root causes that we try and look at as a business and see how can we help? How can we help Jimmy, who wants to offer this service but doesn't have a car and pays exorbitant rent, you know, to use somebody else's car? And we've come up with different mechanisms, like we have a car financing facility, we have an EV bike financing facility, which is cheaper than what you'd find, so that then at the end of the day, the people who have access to these facilities make more. Because that's typically the bane of it, which comes back to, you know, how much am I living in my pocket? That's what every driver cares about. And so we've tried to break down the problem and see where the issue is, because some are doing very well. It's unfortunately the minority that have their own vehicles. The ones that are renting or leasing or all this, then the earnings become a bit of a problem. And these are the systematic issues that we're trying to solve so that more and more people can actually make a very decent livelihood.
All right, so Linda, just in closing, I just want to know what would be your message to drivers, because they seem aggrieved with the current model of operation. So what would be your message to those drivers, and how much can we expect as passengers also in the coming days? Are we likely to see fare hikes? Are we likely to see sort of requests taking longer because we don't have drivers?
So let me start with the second part of the question. And I do think that a lot of things are going on in the back that maybe are not too visible. We're having conversations with our government regulator, NTSA. We are also in a mediation process with drivers. There are a lot of things that we are collectively working towards. So I do not think from a passenger side of things there's cause to worry. Business will continue because we are in the process of finding solutions. And to the drivers as well, I would say it's a bit of a painful journey, but if we stick with it collectively, because this business only thrives if everyone is thriving at the end. So if we stick with it, we get to the crux of the issues, we stop looking at the symptoms and address the actual problems, we're all going to be better off in the end. So we'll keep going, keep moving.
All right, Linda, thanks so much for making time to speak to us. And of course, that's how we wrap up this episode of Market Pulse. Make sure you can catch all the live and all the recorded version of it on Hot 96 every Wednesday and on Citizen Digital on Wednesdays. That's all the time we have for you. My name is Jimmy Bogo. Let's do this again, same time, same place, next week on Wednesday.